Hey there, kiddos. This is Miss Robin again. Today we're going to talk about context clues. Your I can statement for today is I can identify familiar context clues in text. The PowerPoint I'm going to use to remind you of the strategies that are also on the anchor chart on the wall in our room is a PowerPoint by Lisa Lynn Riddle. Want to make sure that you always give credit to somebody else if you're using their work. To find context clues, you have to think like a shark. That shark looks a little mischievous there. You have to look all around to find clues to the meaning of the word. So there are all these different kinds of sharks around that scuba diver, just like you would need to look all around you to find clues in the text. Sentence above, sentence below, maybe even earlier in the paragraph or later in the paragraph. So you have to look all around. Here are specifically 4 strategies to help you attack the word and find its meaning. Attack like a shark. See those teeth? You got to attack like that. Number 1, find a synonym. You might find a word with the same meaning. An example would be, the homework was more complicated or difficult than she first thought. The word we're trying to figure out what it means would be complicated. But I see later in the sentence there's another word that means the same thing. That would be a synonym. So I know that if complicated means about the same as difficult, I can just assume that the homework was harder, I should say, than first thought. Strategy number 2, find an antonym. You might find a word with the opposite meaning. An example would be, even though some of the dogs were very docile, others were very mean. So the word I'm trying to figure out is docile. However, if they're not mean, then I know the dogs must have been nice. So docile must mean nice. That's how to use an antonym context clue. Strategy number 3, find an explanation. This could also be called a definition context clue. It's either an explanation of what the word means or a definition. Lots of times in your textbooks, you're going to see a word maybe even in bold that would also be in the glossary in the back of the book and tell you the meaning of the word. But after the word in bold, they'll have the definition of that word between 2 commas. Here, the word might be explained in the sentence before or after that word, the unfamiliar word. So an example would be, Jo was so exhausted, she could hardly keep her eyes open. So if the word we're trying to figure out what it means is exhausted, then later on in the sentence, it explains, explains what you would be or what you would be doing if you were exhausted. So if she could hardly keep her eyes open, I know that when I can hardly keep my eyes open, it means that I'm tired. So exhausted must mean tired. And the last strategy is find an example. Sometimes right after the word, an example will be given. Here's an example. Celestial bodies such as the sun, moon, and stars can be seen in the sky. Well, if I'm trying to figure out what celestial bodies are, it gives me examples like sun, moon, and stars. I know that celestial bodies must be things that are in the sky. So if it gives an example of the word afterward, that would be an example context clue. If you still can't read the word, leave it and just keep reading. You will probably get the gist if you read the rest of the words. However, if there are a bunch of words that you don't understand, then you need to find a different strategy, such as a dictionary, but we will deal with that in another lesson. Okay, here's what I want to do next. Let's practice a little bit. I've got this document right here. It says find the clues. And what I want here is to read the sentence. Tim made a face and refused to eat the broccoli because he detested all vegetables. Now, one thing I want to do is talk about the meaning and then the context clue that we use to find that meaning. Alrighty, so what we're going to do is we're first going to look at the word detested. Now I know it's got an ed suffix, that would be word part, so I know this is the past tense, so it must be a verb. Tim made a face and refused to eat broccoli because he detested all vegetables, so it's something he did. I know that it talks about vegetables. I know that it talks about him making a face. Now, usually when I make a face, it means that I don't like something. So I can infer that what he's saying and what the word detested means is that he hated the vegetables. What context clue helped me figure out that he hated vegetables? Let me get my little speech bubble here. This would be an explanation context clue. Explanation. There we go. Explanation context clue. Because it tells me that he made a face. So since he made a face, and I know it's something, a verb that he did, then I could say, well, I think he probably hated vegetables. Just to check myself, I could put the word hated into this spot and make sure it still makes sense. Tim made a face and refused to eat the broccoli because he hated all vegetables. That makes sense. But this was an explanation context clue because it told me that he made a face. All right, moving on down to this one. Let's see if I can get my speech bubble back here as well so that I have all of my answers. Hated. There we go. All right, second sentence. Shard looked out the window at the dismal day with its gray clouds and cold, drizzling rain. So I'm trying to figure out what dismal means. Well, I know that it says that there were gray clouds, it was cold, and it was drizzling. So it does not sound like a very nice day. In fact, it sounds like a kind of a nasty day. So I'm going to assume that dismal means nasty day, okay? The context clue that I used would be explanation again, because it explains what would be happening on a nasty day or a dismal day. So the context clue that I used here is explanation again. Moving on down, it says, unlike Bob, who treated others rudely and kept to himself, Brendan was jovial and friendly. Okay, so first of all, it compares Bob and Brendan. It says that Bob was rude and kept to himself, but Brendan was the opposite. He was jovial and friendly. If I'm trying to figure out what jovial means, I see that there is an antonym here, rude, and it says that he wasn't like that. And then I also see a synonym here, friendly. He was friendly. So first of all, I see that they're comparing Bob and Brendan in this sentence. And second, I see where they're saying Bob is rude and Brendan is the opposite. And they also use the word friendly. So I can assume or infer that jovial means nice. The context clues that I used were both antonym and synonym. If I wanted to check myself, I could just put this word into that spot and make sure that the sentence still makes sense. Unlike Bob, who treated others rudely and kept to himself, Brendan was nice and friendly. Yes, still makes sense. Let's try nasty in this spot. Shard looked out the window at the dismal day. Shard looked out the window at the nasty day with its gray clouds and cold, drizzling rain. Yes, that makes sense. Let's go up here. Tim made a face and refused to eat broccoli because he hated all vegetables. Yes, that makes sense. So I have successfully figured out the meanings to each of these bolded words by using the different context clue strategies that we discussed.